Welcome to the December 4th zoning subcommittee meeting. All rise and salute the flag, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call of the members: Councilor Novoselsky. Here. Councilor Powers is absent. Councilor Silvestri.
Here.
Here. Councilor Visconti.
Here.
Here. Council President McKenna. Here. And Chairman Zambudo.
Here.
Here. Quorum is present. First item on this evening's agenda, Council Order 23-263, the application of Nicholas Jacoby, 164 Harris Street, requesting a special permit from the Revere City Council to modify a non-conforming use by restoring an abandoned pre-existing dwelling unit in the rear of the property at 164 Harris Street.
Attorney Simeoni.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm sorry, zoning
Board of
Subcommittee.
Appeals, wait a
I got-
minute, you gave me a promotion.
Exactly. I'm not so sure. But anyway, we're before you, your honorable body, once again on the issue that we raised the last time, which was to seek a special permit for non-conforming use that has been there for many, many years. The three-family, as you know, has been built in 1930. The particular small structure in the rear was built in 1924. The goal was to ask for an extension to allow that former cottage that was built in 1924 and used as a residence to once again be used as a residence. In that case, a couple of neighbors complained, and they stated their position, and my client basically has taken the position that he intends to work with those neighbors, he intends to resolve their issues. I reached out to an architect to make sure a design could be properly made, and a contractor to make sure that we can provide some actual information that would be worthy of showing the subcommittee at its next meeting. I think it's important to realize that, notwithstanding that the process as we set forth, which was to ask for the use first and deal with the second, and to deal with the structure second, was the correct way to go. We didn't, no fast one, no whatever. You can't build the thing and then say, by the way, we'd like a special permit for use, you know? So that being said, my client would respectfully request of this body continuance to the next meeting, which I understand it should be the end of January. By then, we should have some really good information for those seated in the capacity as the zoning subcommittee, as well as yourself, Mr. Chairman. I can answer any questions the committee may want.
Okay.
Depending on which committee.
So you're
I
asking
called.
to continue this?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Any members want to speak on this? Okay, will be continued.
Next application is 23-264, Beachmont Post 6712, Veterans of Foreign Wars, 150 Bennington Street, requesting a special permit from the Revere City Council to change the existing non-conforming accessory parking use to a commercial auto storage parking use, including parking by contractor lease at 150 Bennington Street.
So I don't believe we have anybody here on this, but I think we were all pretty much in favor of this. So how does the committee want to take a vote on this?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Councilor Novoselsky.
Thank you. One thing, I'm not against this. I just have a concern about when they have an event and if it's going to go beyond the 3 years of the construction, if they do 24-hour parking there, there's going to be an issue, a problem.
I don't believe it was ever intended to be 24-hour parking. I don't know where that came from.
But if we give it to them, if we give them this, there's no restriction on it that I know of.
Let me see what
The committee can certainly put conditions on the special permit like any other special permit if you
we
wish.
could put conditions that it won't be 24-hour parking.
Mr. President,
Councilor McKenna.
I believe they said it was only going to be from 9 to 5.
Right.
I believe that was the time, and then after that, it was going to be,
Just club parking? Yeah,
Yes.
I get it.
For
Yeah.
3, and they said for 3 years during the construction of across the street.
I don't see the 3 years as being relevant. I think that if we make it 9 to 5, it's 9 to 5.
I can live with that.
Great.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything on this?
I just want to say one more thing, that the construction company is in my ward, and they only work from 9 to 4 o'clock, so.
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay, on conditions? So let's make it 8 to 6. Is that acceptable? All right.
I gotta agree with Madam Clerk. If it's construction, if they're coming in at 6 a.m., park a car, take a truck, I think we should get their solid times so we don't restrict them, and then they're using it outside the hours. I didn't think this would be an issue to grow into this, but
They're never going to be there past 5 o'clock. So you might be right with the AM.
Right.
Maybe we make it 6 AM to 6 PM instead of 9 to 5. You okay? Okay, everybody's good with that?
Yeah.
And then Frank Stingy had 2 conditions.
Conditions from the city planner.
Conditions from the city planner were as follows: that the 22 parking spaces to be leased be clearly marked on the site and do not encroach on the parking aisles for access and egress to the site; that the parking layout plans be reviewed and approved by the Site Plan Review Committee and Fire Department prior to the request for occupancy to the Inspectional Services Department; and 3, the final condition set forth by the zoning subcommittee, that the time for parking shall be from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Shall the zoning subcommittee offer a favorable recommendation to the full city council with those conditions? Counselor Novoselsky? Yes. Counselor Powers is absent. Counselor Silvestri?
yes.
Yes. Counselor Visconti?
Yes.
Yes. Council President McKenna?
Yes,
Yes. And Chairman Zambudo?
Yes.
Yes, the special permit received a favorable recommendation. And last item on tonight's agenda, Council Order 23-251, zoning ordinance further amending the revised ordinances of the City of Revere by establishing Green Street and Shirley Avenue Smart Growth Overlay Districts pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40R.
Mr. Director.
Good evening, councilors. I will try to be really brief here and then take any questions you might have. I was going to be even briefer, but I did receive a bit of a curveball at the 11th hour. As you all know, the state approves the 40R smart growth districts, and in advance of this meeting, they submitted a few small items of what I call pretty minor feedback that they wanted to incorporate into the changes. I'm going to go through them line by line in a PowerPoint. There's also a track changes version that I believe was shared with all of you, but hopefully I can make it clear enough right here. So I'm going to go through that now, provided the screens work in here. It looks like it is. Excellent. So first I want to talk about what the planning board's recommendation was. They voted last week at a public hearing, talk about some follow-up within the Ward 2 area, the Shirley Avenue Smart Growth District, and then go through again, line by line, each of those state changes. So the planning board last week approved the proposed ordinance amendment. The only amendment they made to the amendment is to adopt some updated Shirley Avenue boundaries reflecting Councilor Novoselsky's request to remove any areas within the overlay that were underlying RB, residential areas. So I did highlight those on a map just to show you. It's these areas here in red, and here, here, and here. So those areas are currently RB. And so those were proposed to be removed from the district, and the planning board agreed with that recommendation. Subsequent to that meeting last week, Councilor Novoselsky made one other recommendation that will be in front of the subcommittee tonight, which is to additionally request that parcels adjacent to the residential districts are restricted to 5 stories. As you all probably remember, the districts height limit currently is set at 60 feet and 6 stories. But basically what we would be doing here, and you can see it on a map, all of the areas in red are not abutting residential areas. And those areas in red would have a height limit of 6 stories. The areas in blue that are directly abutting residential districts would have a height limit of 5 stories. So that's this area here, and here as well. You might note that this area up here technically does abut the RB district, but due to complicated zoning reasons, basically it's called the merger doctrine, which states that multiple lots held in common ownership are considered one lot for zoning purposes. And because this is a sizable lot that really is a key linchpin to us getting into compliance, that one would need to remain at 6 stories. But all the other lots in question here would be a 5-story limit. Everything in red would be 6 stories. So again, 5 stories is what it is today already under the existing zoning. And actually, I'll pause there for a second to make sure anyone, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them before I move on to the next piece.
So before you go on, I want to take a moment to mention a few of our newly elected officials here. Ward 4 Councilor Paul Argenzio, Councilor at Large, oh, are we supposed to clap? Councilor at Large, Michelle Kelly, and Ward 5 Councilor Angela Garino Sawaya. I got that right, didn't I? Okay, we can continue now.
All right, thank you. And then the state approved the ordinance with a few minor changes, which I don't think are of major substance, but worth noting. So again, I'll go through them one by one. The first thing, they recommended we adjust the definition of affordable housing back to what it actually is in the state's definition. We had a reference to Title 17. I think that was just something we did internally. We don't actually have affordable housing defined in our zoning ordinance today, so it doesn't make any sense. It was a good recommendation. The second was to remove reference to apartment houses. This is another case where apartment houses isn't actually used anywhere throughout the ordinance. So I think we were trying to cover all of our bases, and that was a base we didn't need to cover at the end of the day. Number 3 was adding a definition of 3-family dwellings. Because we have single family, 2-family, and 3-family defined, or single and 2-family defined, they wanted to add 3 families as well. Multifamily developments in this ordinance are basically any above and beyond 3. So the next recommendation was to relocate height limits from there's basically 3 different sections that address dimensional considerations in this ordinance. One is for all those things that apply to both districts. The second are all those that apply to Green Street. The third is all those that apply to the Shirley Avenue district only. This originally height limits was applying across the board to all districts. They recommended we remove that to correspond with the amendment that Councilor Novoselsky proposed. So then basically Shirley Avenue, as we'll see in a minute, will have a more tailored height consideration. I'll get to it in a minute. I think it might make more sense at that point. The second was to add minimum dwelling units per acre. This is a statutory requirement by the 40R program. And just to be transparent with you here, the big one is 20 units per acre for multifamily development. The 2 acres, or the 2 projects that we have in front of us, Green Street and Shirley Avenue, the dwelling units per acre are well above 20 acres, 20 units per acre. With the single family, the 2-family, and the 3-family as listed here, I'm not sure we're going to see a lot of single family, 2-family, 3-family development, particularly in the Green Street area. But at least for the Shirley Avenue area, this would correspond with what's currently allowed for single, 2, and 3 families. They required that we had a parking maximum, which is basically just states you can't require more than 2 spaces per unit, but I'm not sure we've ever done that. This seems like one of the things we have to check the state's box to add that, so we're not overbuilding parking, but I think that's not something we are going to do anyway, so I didn't see that as an issue. The seventh was to relocate the Green Street height limits. So again, they're the same as they were before, 60 feet, 6 stories, but they're now actually moved to the Green Street section specifically in the ordinance. And then similarly with number 8, relocated height limits for the 2 Shirley Avenue sub-districts. So sub-district A is, if you recall that map, all the areas that were in red, most of the Shirley Avenue district would continue to have a height limit of 60 feet or 6 stories. Those areas in kind of that blue tone would have 50 feet or 5 stories. So again, it was just relocating to reflect that new amendment, provided the subcommittee approves it. And that's it. So I'll take any questions that you might have.
Council Silvestri. Council Novoselsky.
Thank you, councilors, and Mr. President, and Mr. Chairman. Tom, thank you for these, and everybody knows I'm always looking out for my district, and, we seem to be the target for this particular zoning, and I wanted to protect the neighbors as much as possible. That's why, even when we worked with HYM and building, we already built small along the street, and then allowed them to go as they went inland towards a project to go higher. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I just don't want people that are living in a 2-family house, a 2-story house, having to look up to a 6-story building. 5's a little high as far as, I'm still concerned, but as I was told, that down the road, all of us, most of us, may not even be around when this takes effect. But we have to do it because of the state. Yeah. And so when somebody comes in that one of the red districts, and there's an issue, or say in the blue district, which is 5, if there are enough neighbors complaining, the city can reduce it down to 4, based on amount of complaints from the residents, the local residents. So there is an option there to get some more relief. But again, it's down the road, and I can live with the 5 for now and see what happens down the road. And work on one thing I wanted to ask was, we talked about parking on the first floor, on the either 5 or 6 height. Is that 5 or 6 height from the ground to the top, and the parking is part of that 60 feet or 50 feet?
The parking would be part of the height limit.
Okay.
So if it's 50 feet height limit and there is a story of parking already, it would actually be effectively 4 stories with parking
right,
underneath.
and the same thing with the 6s.
Right,
They would
and
be,
exactly.
For the number of units we're talking.
Correct. And so both the parking requirement and the FAR would also effectively limit height in a lot of these smaller parcels to something lower than the maximum height limit. I think the maximum height limit is probably more appropriate for those larger parcels of land.
Yeah, so, well, thank you, I appreciate all your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Silvestri.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tom, a few questions, and this is a concern which I understand, but a few people have called me. But can you explain that this is not a zoning ordinance that's going to be mapped across the city? This is just particular to the Shirley Avenue and Green Street areas. This isn't going to be, you can buy a piece of property on Rumney Road, remove a house, and put up apartments.
That's absolutely correct. So, and I know Councilor Serino had asked at the first meeting, what the alternatives were we looked at. I mentioned it earlier, but the alternatives were looking at other areas that are either zone multifamily today or other areas that aren't zone multifamily today, and increasing basically across the board. And I appreciate Councilor Novoselsky and Councilor McKenna's willingness to concentrate the development in those areas that maybe we can afford to have less parking requirements and we can afford to build up because we're closer to transit. But yes, to answer your question very succinctly, it's strictly those 2 areas that we're looking at.
And just one more question. Is it possible to put that 5-story requirement in both sections? I think it's, I don't know, I think 6 stories, we've tried to stay away from, and to put it in one section, I think you're putting that into another neighborhood. I think 5 stories, is it possible, or do we have to go to the same 5 and 6?
Anything's possible. I think what we would need to have a better understanding of the impact on the unit capacity, and whether that would still help us meet our state goal. What I can say pretty confidently, I think, is if we were to approve a project in the Green Street area through this ordinance, there are enough, trying to think of the effective way to put this, design standards that can help guide the way the site plan review committee reviews these projects on a case-by-case basis to make sure that the impact is minimized. So, I mean, it's also certainly something we could look at, but the other problem that I mentioned, you know, with the merger doctrine, if we said all the parcels that border the residential neighborhood only would be 5 stories, effectively that would make the whole area in Green Street, or at least the vast majority of it, 5 stories, because it's all owned under common ownership for the most part, with a few exceptions, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Visconti.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tom, can you just confirm what Councilor Novoselsky said? Because I'm a little confused. He says if we go 6 and we put that in the ordinance, that we can have people who are against it, enough people that are against it would drop from 6 to 5. And I thought, it's 4, I'm sorry, even 4. But I thought once it's in the overlay district, it is what it is, right? If they have the option of doing it, then they have it to do it by right. Isn't that, I'm confused.
Right. So I actually put it back up on the map, and if it'd be possible to get back up on the screen just so we all have a visual once again. So all the areas in that like teal color, or whatever we want to call it, I don't know, electric blue, those would be the areas where it would be a height limit of 5. Everything that is that darker red would be still a height limit of 6. So I think what Councilor Novoselsky was referring to is, and I was going to mention this, in partnership with our folks with the TDI partnership, which we've got a public-private partnership working in Shirley Avenue with the city, with the ward councilor, with Mass Development, and multiple different sort of business groups and interest groups in the neighborhood. We will be, after this, putting together a set of design standards that basically state what is and isn't allowed within the district, and a lot of that will be speaking to Councilor Novoselsky's concerns about addressing height limits as it pertains to residential areas. So not only will one have to conform to the height limits, you'll have to conform to our design standards and FAR and parking requirements. And taken together, I think it'll effectively reduce the height limits in a lot of those smaller lots, not across the board. But to his point as well, the Site Plan Review Committee has a great deal of discretion to work with a developer, not in the same way as a special permit. So, to answer it directly, we couldn't just say, no, you have to build 4, but there is a conversation that started through the site plan review process that design standards put together with the ward council in the neighborhood could help guide it towards the development we'd like to see.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Sereno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I pass. I was going to say something, but that's okay at this point. Thank you.
So, unfavorable. Okay. You want me to do the amendments? Or are you? Okay. Right, so we're going to approve this with the amendments. Okay. Okay, gotcha, thank you. Okay, so we're going to vote on the amendments. Okay, so we got an audience participant wants to speak.
And I just wanted to add, for the record, that, much the same at the last public hearing, my clients who own property on Green Street, their property is split in two by this overlay district. I've spoken to Tom, and it appeared that in the beginning, he had no problem expanding the overlay district to make sure it has both sides of Green Street, wherein my client, 333 Lee Burbank Highway LLC and Sika Realty Trust has property on both sides. So we would ask you to include that as a condition in any approval you have, because if not, then my client's property is dissected by virtue of the middle of the street and doesn't seem to make a good planning proposal.
Tom, can you get up and help us with this?
Yes, I can. So at the public hearing, Attorney Simeone's clients had requested that additional parcels be added to the Green Street District. And those parcels did not have the support of the ward councilor at the time. And when I presented that to the planning board to make their recommendations, in turn, they did not recommend that those parcels be included in the district. So the map amendment that the planning board recommended was only for the Shirley Avenue district, not for the Green Street district. If the subcommittee wanted to deliberate further on whether it was a worthwhile endeavor to include those parcels, I could show you what they look like on a map, but I'll defer to the chair and the group on that.
Mr. President, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Councilor McKenna.
right now, if we-
President McKenna.
Thank you. If we're going to do a roll call and approve this tonight, I would just like to approve what Tom is proposing. I don't want to approve the other part of this. So, great, yeah.
Okay, so if we do that, I think they can come back with a zoning amendment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I think everybody could be whole in the end here. Okay, so we're not going to hold up this vote to recommend to the city council that we vote. We need 8 votes for tonight if it's going to pass anyway. So I don't know that we'll have them. Okay, Madam Clerk, where are we?
So pick up the amendments first, as presented by Tom.
Great. Okay, so we're going to vote on the amendments first.
On the amendments as proposed by Chief of Planning and Community Development Tom Skorowski and the Planning Board recommendations. Counselor Novoselsky.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Powers is absent. Counselor Silvestri.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Visconti.
Yes.
Yes. Council President McKenna.
Yes.
Yes. And Chairman Zambudo.
Yes.
Yes, the amendments have been approved. Now the ordinance, Smart Growth Overlay District Ordinance as amended is now before the zoning subcommittee.
To recommend to the city
recommend
council for
for-
a favorable vote. Okay, here we go.
On the Smart Growth Overlay District as amended, shall the zoning subcommittee offer a favorable recommendation to the full city council for adoption? Counselor Novoselsky?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Powers is absent. Counselor Silvestri?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Visconti?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Chairman Zambudo?
Yes.
Yes, and President McKenna?
Yes.
Yes, the ordinance as amended has received a favorable recommendation for adoption.
Thank you.
There's no further business.
That concludes this zoning subcommittee meeting. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, December 4th. Welcome to the Legislative Affairs Subcommittee. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call of the members of the Legislative Affairs Subcommittee. Counselor Novoselsky. Here. Counselor Powers is absent. Counselor Silvestri.
Here.
Yes, here. President McKenna. Here. And Chairman Morabito.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Here, a quorum is present.
This evening, we have one item on the agenda. A motion presented by myself that the acting mayor be requested to establish a water main break recovery grant program that offers grants to affected business and property owners who suffer financial material losses due to water main breaks. This will allow certain eligible businesses and property owners who sustain damage and losses not covered from their insurance to apply for funds up to $5,000. Does anyone on this subcommittee have any comments that they would like to make? Councilor Silvestri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, where would this money come from? Do we have an idea of that? That would be my only concern. I always want to support our residents and our small businesses as much as possible. But not having a source of funding, I think, would be a little bit irresponsible. So where do you suggest we find this money?
Well, Councilor, keep in mind, this is a request to the mayor, the acting mayor, to create a grant program. So if they find it's not feasible to come up with a resource, then they would come back to us and let us know. Right now, the sole purpose of this is to create grant funding. I think when there's unforeseen occurrences that happen where there's a water main break and you're running a business and you have to close down and you have staff that you have to pay, and these are loyal staff members, and they're not going to stick around for a month until you open back up or until insurance companies make payments. So part of these funds will help alleviate the burden of that cost or something, or inventory costs. Anything that can help the small business person, I think we should look into doing. We recently had an incident where the Good Diner was impacted because of a water main break, and a program like this would have helped him pay his employees. And we're not talking $1 million, we're talking about $5,000. Let's keep in mind, not many businesses are impacted by this on a yearly basis, so the resources wouldn't be in abundant amounts, but it would be the mayor's mayor and their administration's responsibility to look into the resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is kind of unusual that we want to do this and we want to help our businesses, but realize it's homeowners too that you included. if I'm
Correct.
So if there was a flood and a whole street got flooded and homeowners got affected by this, you could be talking $50,000 or more, depending on how many homes there were. So now the mayor would have to take the money out of our general fund. That's where he would have to put this grant money in order for them to apply. Now, this isn't something that people are just going to get just because they say so. They still have to file kind of a suit.
There would be an application process, yes.
Through the city solicitor, because that's where most of them usually go. And he would have to do an investigation of whatever happened or whatever the sources have to be. But they'd have to go through, it's not something that would happen overnight for them. So,
But let's keep in mind that most homeowners would be covered through their insurance programs.
so are businesses.
Yes, but this would cover the day-to-day cost that would help them get through, for instance, the cleaning. If they don't have the money to cleaning, it would be something that they could get through the city, or the cleanup and the anything basically the insurance wouldn't cover. It's a way to give back if the city is at fault.
And I understand that. Having been a victim of a water break and floods, the insurance covers cleanup, you know, and damage to the facility itself. I didn't have a problem paying everything, and everything was covered through the insurance. So, but there may be items like in a business, it could be product that is not covered. I don't know that, but we just have to be careful and let everybody know that it may not happen.
Once again, the purpose of this is for the mayor and his team to look into a grant recovery program for people who sustain a loss that is not covered through the insurance. Councilor Visconti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is not voting on, this is just voting on the mayor to do the research, not voting on the actual.
It's actually to create a recovery grant program.
Okay, great. And do we have actually the parameters that the grant program, because like Councilor Novoselsky said, if you're including homeowners, there are houses that get flooded quite a bit, and to include that is kind of difficult, you know, because people are going to be rushing to get that money from the city if there's a problem. Let's say if there's ever black water or whatever the case may be, you know, it could run up some substantial amount of money. And I'm just wondering what the parameters would be.
So
Do you
maybe
wanna
have a
keep-
cap, so you're.
Well, I would say, I don't even know, I think what we should do is probably write some restrictions on it as well, rather than just leaving it open-ended, is my opinion, but, because you are opening the city to, if residents know, and we want to help the residents and the businesses, but if, you know, we have areas that get flooded quite often, okay? And if we're setting up a fund for them, I don't even know how we're going to fund that account, you know, because it happens that often. And expect residents to look into that and trying to get that money. So I think we should set restrictions, just my opinion. And I'm not on the subcommittee, I'm talking as not a member, so, but do as you will.
No, I appreciate your opinion, and quite often we do, when something occurs, we're very reactive, and we end up creating a fund to help residents. But why not have a proactive approach and create a water main recovery program? This way, when it does happen, we already have a source that we can take from and help the residents or business owners who are impacted from this.
Okay, just my opinion, but that's fine.
If it's the will of the subcommittee members to leave this in committee or amend it so the mayor can come up with a source, or if they think if we can, why don't Madam Clerk, we're going to amend this to have the mayor look into the feasibility of creating a water main
Thank you, yeah, that would.
recovery break.
That'd be great,
Mr.
yeah.
Chairman, that was my suggestion to request the mayor to research the establishment of this program. Something to that effect.
Yeah, I think the main feasibility, we want to see if it's feasible, right? I think the main concern is, do we have the resources? Can we foot the bill? So I think a feasibility. Can you reread that, Madam Clerk?
As amended by Councilor Morabito, that the acting mayor be requested to investigate the feasibility of establishing a water main break recovery grant program that offers grants to affected businesses and property owners who suffer financial, material losses due to water main breaks. This will allow certain eligible businesses and property owners who sustain damage and losses not covered from their insurance to apply for funds of up to $5,000.
Council Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a thought, I would like to see the, as long as the mayor is in agreement, have the superintendent of water and sewer take place in these discussions to make a determination as to how severe this could be or could not be, and how much money we could, be involved here. We don't want to send the city into bankruptcy.
So once again, what a feasibility study is, Counselor, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, a feasibility is to see if it can happen. They look at all the metrics, they look at all the data, they look at all the pros, they look at all the cons, and they look at whether this is affordable, how is it going to impact the city, and if it can be done in a fiscally responsible way. So, does anyone else have any other comments? Is everyone? Mr. Charamello? Absolutely. Name and address.
Don Charamello, 215 Rice Avenue, Revere. Don Charamello, Chief of Infrastructure for the City of Revere. So there's just one thing that I want everybody to think about. There was a comment made about the fault of the city. By no means do we try to cause any harm or, inconvenience to people. These are incidences because the water mains that I've expressed many times are extremely old, well over 100 years old, well over 100 years old. The pipes have reached their life expectancy twice over. We take 40 to 50 PSI from MWRA. My pipes are mandated, new water mains that we put in the ground are able to hold 350 PSI. That's what we're mandated to put into the ground. 350 pounds per square inch. Taft, one day, blew up 6 times. Every time we turned the water back on, and the water pressure down there was only 40 PSI. Our pipes cannot hold 50, 60 PSI. They cannot, certainly not hold 80. But they're mandated. New pipes that we put in the ground today can hold 350 PSI. So the only way it could be a fault of the city if we intentionally tried to break the pipes. So I understand there's a lot of, certainly a lot of financial burden that people do suffer from these breaks. But in no way, the city has replaced over 14 miles of water main since 2017 at $3 million a mile. So we're certainly trying to do our due diligence. Prior to that, I don't know, it hasn't, you can quantify the replacement of water mains in feet. So we're certainly trying to do our job to upgrade the water system. Because when it is all complete, and someday it will be, when I have all 107 miles of water mains replaced, I'll be able to pick up the phone. Before then, too, call MWRA and tell them to ramp up the pressure at my 5 PRVs, soon to be 6 down the Point of Pines. Because we had that 6 coming over the General Edwards Bridge, but they disconnected it. But it's coming back across. So then I'll have 6 places where I can ask MWRA to ramp up the pressure and deliver 80 to 90, maybe 100 PSI, because my pipes can hold 350. So people's plumbing won't be able to hold it. That will be the other issue. But right now, these water main breaks that happen, 40 PSI. That's shameful.
Mr. Charamello, thank you for you're always a fountain of information. Let me retract what I said when I said the fault of the city. What I mean is the aging infrastructure, and if someone if a water main break occurs because of the aging infrastructure or the infrastructure fails. So let me retract that. And thank you for the job you and your team does. And if we can take a roll call?
On the motion as amended, to offer a favorable recommendation for adoption in front, for the full city council. Council Novoselsky?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Powers? Yes. Councilor Silvestri?
Yes.
Yes. President McKenna? Yes. And Chairman Morbido?
Yes.
Yes, the motion as amended received a favorable recommendation. No further business.
This meeting is adjourned.